So I'm between you and lunch at this point, and we are running late. So if you want to leave at 1 o'clock, I won't be offended, but I do have this gentleman right here who's going to try to stop you. So, my name is Todd Polonak, Cannabis CPA and Advisor. I am a partner at Saks, which is a top 100 national firm. Cannabis is not just my business, it's my passion. I tell people, some people are now calling me Todd Father, because I really want to see the whole East Coast turn green, and if I can be part of that movement, that's what I really want to do. Right, Enrique? I do have a podcast called Good Morning Cannabis. You can check it out. You can find it on the Saks website. I also have a new website that's my name. So if you remember my name and put a .com at it, you'll find our podcast there. Enrique actually was on one of my guests, and I think some of you else may have been on my podcast. The whole point is to try to educate and elevate people in the industry. So yes, I'm a cannabis CPA. I can just go on and on and on various topics, but since this is about how to prepare your business for investment for investors, I did something a little bit different, and just bear with me because it's a little different, Enrique. I know I don't have a polished, PowerPoint. I don't have any notes, so it's just going to come from my heart. My daughter Noelle, who is my oldest, she likes to dig up old pictures and then put them in my office at work. So there's a picture, I don't know if you saw it, Alex, it's a picture of me when I'm 10 years old. It's actually sitting on the windowsill. And people say, why do you have a picture of you at 10 years old? It's because I wanted to remind myself that if I came back and spoke to my 10-year-old self, what would I say to myself to prepare me for all the things, the challenges that have happened to me over life? So I want to take the next 10 minutes, and that's all I'll take, maybe 20, maybe 40, maybe an hour, I don't know, sharing with you that if you are starting out looking for investors, what are some things that they're going to be looking for from their lips? So I was at the Benzinga event. Benzinga is a big cannabis investor event that happens. I flew back from Chicago because I wanted to be here. But I decided when I went there, instead of just doing my normal networking, I would actually ask the investors for you what they would say if they were here as to what they are really looking for in investing in a cannabis company. I also spoke to CEOs of companies that actually are now operating in cannabis, and some also CFOs and CEOs of ancillary companies. I said, come on, tell me, what would you tell them? So here it is. Now, I'm not going to list people's names, and I'm combining people together, so I'm not giving you word for word, but this is what they said. One gentleman who represents a pretty good-sized investor group located in New York City said, we've been burned over and over again. So we've learned some things when we go to folks who are looking to raise capital and get our money. He said, what really tweaks me is that they really don't understand their business plan. And they can't really explain the source and use of their funds. So if you don't know what that means, you need to talk to me afterwards because you haven't gotten to that point. But what he is saying is that if I give you money, I want to know exactly how you're spending that money. And as a matter of fact, I want to know what support you have for those numbers. If you just made this stuff up because you pulled it off the internet or you hired someone cheap to do the pro formas, it ain't going to fly with us. So he said, you need to really understand source and use of funds and be able to express that in an intelligent way. He also said to me, I really want to know if this entity, if this group has thought about what their funding needs are going to be in the future. Yeah, I get all the legalese. He didn't exactly say that, but I want to know, have you thought about when you're going to need more money? Because I don't want to be in a situation where we have a fight because now you need more money and you're going to be diluting my shares. So have you even thought about that? So you're thinking about it. I haven't even started yet. You want me to think about the future too? Yes. He said, I want to know if that group really understands the nuts and bolts of accounting and bookkeeping for cannabis companies. I thought that was really interesting. Because usually, and the attorneys have told me this, they said, why do they always get the accountants in last? Is it because they don't want to pay for it? I don't get it. They should get the cannabis CPAs, and I said cannabis CPAs because it is very specific, in early while you're forming the company and setting it up, not after the fact. They want to know, do you understand 280E, which is the tax code, which I'm not going to get into? Do you really have set up, or you're anticipating the type of software system you're going to be using? Because he said, I want to know that that company eventually may be auditable so that I can possibly be part of that deal when a company is sold. So if you start off cheap or inexperienced and you go to an investor where they really want to write you a check, it's not just, the guys with the hard money with, the leather shoes and boots and who are also take off your legs if you don't repay it. If you want to go to serious investors, they want to know that you have a structure, not just a corporate structure, an accounting structure, a reporting structure that they can get the records for with data to measure their investment. Another investor told me, he said, you know what, Todd? These people really don't understand your business at all. And maybe you don't because you're new in it. But get somebody who does understand business to explain it to the investor. He said, I get 20 decks a day. And he said, if I don't see in those decks something that sets that entity apart from everybody else, I just delete it. So he said, make sure you tell them, you need to stand for something. You can't stand for everything. He said, you need to have something that distinguishes you from all the rest. And he also put this in, so I hope you don't get offended when I say this, but he said, I know we want to do social good, but bottom line, we want to make money. So if you just say what makes you different is that you're doing social good, that's not enough. I want to know how you're going to make money from the return on investment. Another one said to me, I want to make sure that these potential folks who are investing in really understand how they're going to get customers, how they're going to retain customers. Do they even understand that pattern in the state that they're working? Now, Benzinga, as you know, is a national conference. We have people all over. We have MSOs who are coming in. We have people in the space, not in the space. One gentleman, ancillary but has raised much capital, said to me, tell them that they need to get their beep together. I beeped it instead of saying it. They got to get their shit together. I said it now. Both internally and externally, because it is really important that if you go too soon to the investor group and you're not ready, they're not even going to talk to you again. And let me tell you, this is a small community. Have you noticed that we all walk around hugging each other? Me and Stacy, we hug each other. I high-five Harry when I see him from Citron. This is a small community, so when they know, when the true people who are going to invest in you know the people who are not really the players, they're not going to talk to you a second time. They also said to me, interestingly enough, that you need to understand that when you're starting out as a business, your net is going to be cast differently than when you're an existing business. So this one gentleman said to me, when you're a cannabis company and you're starting out, you're going to cast your net wide. You're going to cast it wide. And he said the two things that he found cannabis investors really are very interested in is, number one, how you distinguish yourself from your competition, and whether or not you have a team that can really build it. But when you start going outside of that group, because cannabis investors are not going to be investing, millions and millions and millions of dollars. All right? So if you're trying to ramp up to be a bigger business, that's not going to happen to your typical cannabis investor. But when you're really up and going, and now you really need more money, that's a different group of people that you're networking with. And they're usually non-cannabis investors that you have to educate, make them feel comfortable in the space. I also spoke, interestingly enough, to people who have gotten the licenses in other states and told me their woes. So let me share that with you. One woe was, you know what, Todd? This one young lady said, who has a cultivation site in Massachusetts, we did not do it right because we went to family and friends and we gave away a whole lot of our shares. And so there's a lot of small investors, and now the big investors are not really interested in us. So tell them, be very careful that you don't give away too much right away. And I had another person who was a startup from another state who said, make sure you warn them about the predators, because they're out there. There's predatory people who want to partner with you, who you need to stay away from. If you talk to the people who are in the cannabis world here, you might be able to vet some of them, but I'm sorry to say there are some people who are now in really dire straits. Overall, from an accounting tax perspective, what they told me, they want to know that that company, when it's set up, is set up properly. They have internal controls, both preventive and detective controls, that they really understand that the tax aspects of cannabis, 280E, which is basically, at the federal government, it's about a 70% tax rate, then you tack on the state tax rate, and then, people say to me, why are we doing this legally? We should just do it illegally, because we're paying so much in taxes. That you have a real understanding. So, bottom line, as I told you I was going to keep this kind of succinct, and I'm happy to stick around and tell you more. What they told me was this. It actually relates to the hat of possibilities, Enrique. So let me start with the hat of possibilities, and I'm going to close with this and open it up for questions. Hat of possibilities, yes, it's my idea, and I don't walk around with the hat all the time. And when I come to the events, everyone says, where's the guy with the hat? It's to remind everyone there is possibilities. This is the hat of possibilities. Between the top of the hat and your skull, there's a gap. Hopefully the gap is not in your head, but it's between the top of your hat and your skull. That creates the opportunity, that difference creates the opportunity either for success or failure. If you use your own mind, your own head, and surround yourself with like-minded people who know what they're doing, you tip your hat to success. If you go it alone, or you go it cheap, or you go it with your ambition without anything but behind you, it actually tips to the possibility of total failure. So over and over again, the repeated thing that these investors said to me, as well as the CEOs, they said this over and over. This is the one theme. If you leave today with anything and you know the answer, I'm going to tell it to you anyway. They said, we bet always, and they said always, on the jockey, not the horse. Always. They look at your team. If you don't have a team of professionals, you don't have a cannabis CPA, you don't have an attorney who really understands cannabis rules, you don't have somebody who actually legitimately knows cannabis, no, not just illegally, but legitimately, legally. If you don't have someone who understands business, if you don't have someone who understands the community, is plugged into the community, if you don't have someone who can relate to the investors, we're not interested. And by the way, they all said, cannabis is pretty risky. We could put our money in something else and get perhaps a more solid return with less risk. So we really need to be convinced that this is going to work. So, what I'd say to you as a takeaway, look at your business plans. Do the numbers really make sense? Can you really support them? If not, hire somebody who will actually be able to go through. We're doing that with several people who use other people to write the pro formas and the business plans. Now they're going to investors, and the investors don't want to look at the deck because the numbers are stupid. I would say something else, but I don't want you to bleep out twice. So you need to get those numbers so that they make sense. You need to make sure you have the correct team of people to present to the investors. You need to distinguish yourself in the marketplace as something other than another dispensary in a town that's opted in, who has really nice, interior walls with things hanging from it. You need to distinguish yourself from somebody else, and you need to tell them how they're going to make their money back plus some. And that's pretty much what I heard at Benzinga. A lot more, but I don't have as much time to share it with you. But if you want to know more, check me out on sacsllp.com, toddpolinak.com. You can see the podcast. If anyone is interested in being interviewed on the podcast, let me know. We'll talk about that. And hire the right professionals, the right team, because the investors are looking for not the horse, but the jockey. And with that, any questions that you want to put me on the spot, that I'll just ignore. Not a kid. Because I'm between you, literally, and food. I don't know how hungry you are. But once I step off the stage, I know you're all going to go get some.